darlings, Mimi G here with another sew along as part of my latest pre-spring pattern collection with Simplicity. Today we're going to be making this amazing jumpsuit, which is pattern 8060. Let's get started. You're clearly going to need the pattern, and I want to point out that in the back of the pattern envelope it tells you exactly what fabric choices you have available to you, and it also lets you know what notions you're going to need. So it lets you know that you need thread, you need buttons, you're going to need a zipper. All of those things are on the back of the pattern envelope. Now if you're new to sewing or you just need a refresher course, make sure to watch the Sewing Basics video linked in the description box below, where I show you how to read your pattern, cut out your fabrics, and really how to understand everything that is written on these pattern pieces. Once you watch that video, come back and sew along with me. If you watched the Sewing Basics video, you know everything you needed to do and how to read all of the instructions that are given on your pattern pieces. But there are a lot of pattern pieces for this jumpsuit. So I'm going to go through all of these pieces and let you know exactly what to cut and what to interface, just to make sure that you have it all. One of the pattern pieces is pattern number 3, and this is the pocket flap. You're going to be cutting out 4. You're going to interface 2. Pattern piece number 18 is your drawstring, and you're going to cut out 2. Pattern piece number 10 is the casing, and you're going to be cutting out 2. Pattern piece number 9 is actually your button guide. You do not cut this out of fabric. You simply place it over the top of your bodice and mark your buttonholes, and then you make your buttonholes according to that. I'm going to be using snaps for my jumpsuit, so I won't be making buttonholes. Pattern piece number 6, which is the neckband to our collar, you're going to cut out 2 and interface 1. Then we have our fly front, so you're going to cut out pattern piece number 15, just 1, and you're going to interface it. And then pattern piece number 16, which is our underlap, and you're also only cutting out 1 and interfacing 1. Then pattern piece number 7, which is our collar, and you're going to cut out 2 and you're going to interface 1. Pattern piece number 2, which is our pocket, and you're going to cut out 2. This is the back of our shirt, our yoke, and you're going to be cutting out 1 on the fold of your fabric. Pattern piece number 4, which is the back, and you're going to be cutting out 1 also on the fold. Pattern piece number 1 is our front bodice, and you're going to be cutting out 2. Pattern piece number 8 is our sleeve. You're going to be cutting out 2. Then we have 13 and 14. This is our pocket and our pocket facing. So you're going to be cutting out 2 and 2. Then we have pattern piece number 17, which is the back of our pants, and you're going to be cutting out 2. And then we're going to cut out pattern piece number 12, which is the left pant, and you're only going to be cutting out 1, and you're also going to cut out 1 out of the right pant. Now usually for the front of our pants we cut out 1 piece twice, but because we're doing a full fly front, we need a separate front and a separate right front and a separate left front. Now once you cut out all of your pieces out of fabric, we're ready to start sewing. So go pour yourself a glass of wine and sip as you sew along, because it's going to take us a minute. But don't drink too much, okay, because we need some straight stitching. So just a little sip and sew, a little sip and sew. Got it? Let's start sewing. Okay, I want you to grab pattern piece number 1, which should be the 2 front pieces for your bodice. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn over your fold lines. So you're going to turn over 1 fold line, which you should have marked, and then you're going to turn that second fold line over, and we're going to sew close to the edge. So we're folding to the wrong side of our fabric. The right side of our fabric is underneath. So you want to fold and then fold again. And then you're going to sew pretty close to that edge. Try and be as neat as possible, because this is a top stitch and will be seen on the other side. Be nice and neat in the front. And now I want you to pinch out your dart. I've already pinned it out at my dart legs. And I have a pin at the end of my dart, so I know where to stop. want you to go ahead and press this dart down and flat so the dart leg is facing down. And then after you do that, I want you to grab your pocket and your pocket flap. Okay, I'm looking at the right side of my pocket, and I'm gonna fold over where you have that fold line. And we're going to stitch all the way around our pocket using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now you're going to take this to your ironing table. You're going to turn this out. You're going to push out your corners. And then you're going to fold and press along your stitching line. So we have our stitches. You're going to turn over so that you don't see the stitching, and you're going to press it all the way around. Okay, so I have my pocket pressed all the way around, and so I'm just going to turn this over, and I'm going to sew just one stitching line 5/8 of an inch down from my finished edge. Grab your bodice, and you should have 4 dots. You should have 2 small dots where the flap goes, and then you should have 2 dots where you're going to place your pocket. So I want you to pin each corner of your pocket to each dot, and then I pin at the bottom too. And you're going to sew a top stitch all the way around, pretty close to the edge. Cut off any loose threads. You can give this a press, and then you're going to grab your flaps. We're going to sew our flaps together. So right sides facing each other. Now, these flaps do have buttonholes, and if you wish to do your buttonholes, you're going to have to use your sewing machine manual if you're not aware on how to make them, and follow those instructions because our machines are different. I'm going to be using snaps for my jumpsuit, so I will not be making any buttonholes. We're going to sew this using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Trim around your flap. Turn your flap right side out. Poke out your corners. Go ahead and give this a good press. We're going to top stitch it and then attach it to our bodice. Okay, I have my pocket flap, so I'm going to stitch all the way around, right along the edge here. You can go ahead and give this one more press if you'd like, and grab your bodice. And you're going to place the right side of your flap down. You're going to align your dots. Fold it over, make sure everything looks right. Pin it so it doesn't move. And stitch it down. Then you can go ahead and press this down, and we're going to top stitch across the top. Give it one final press. I'm going to pin that so I know where I'm going to put my snaps later. And you're going to do the same exact thing to the other front, the way I've done here. Okay, we're gonna grab our back and our yoke. And working on our back first, we're gonna make our pleat. With the right side of the back facing you, you're going to bring your broken lines to your straight lines to create that pleat in the middle. You should have marked those lines on your fabric. I just make little slits into my fabric. And you're just gonna stitch across the back. And now you're going to pin your yoke. Right sides are facing each other. The right side of my yoke is facing the right side of my back. Align notches. Pin. And stitch across the back. Go ahead and serge your edge or finish it off however you want to finish it off. And then you're going to press your seam so that it's nice and flat. And then we're going to attach our front to back at shoulders. Okay, I'm going to pin front to back. I'm going to lay front to back, right side's facing. And I'm going to pin at the shoulder like you see here, aligning, making sure my notches are aligned. And I'm going to stitch across the top of this shoulder. And I have already pinned my other shoulder, and I'm going to stitch it the same way. So your other shoulder the same way. Go ahead and press your seams. Okay, once we have attached front to back at shoulders, we're going to set this aside for just a second. And I want you to grab your collar and your neckband. I want you to place your collar right sides facing, one side should be interfaced, and we're going to stitch down the side and across the bottom. So you might want to use a couple of pins, make sure it all stays together. Go ahead and trim your collar. I like to trim around my corners. And turn this over and give it a good press. Make sure to push out your corners. Go ahead and press out your collar. Okay, now we're going to top stitch around our collar. Okay, on the non-interfaced neckband, we're going to just do a stitching line all the way down across the bottom with a 3/8 of an inch seam, so we can turn that under and press it. Now this is the right side, so on the wrong side, I want you to turn it up just enough so that you don't see the stitching on the right side, and I want you to press that all the way across the bottom. Now I want you to take your interfaced neckband, and we're going to sew it onto our bodice. Before we do that, we don't want our bodice to stretch, so I'm going to stay stitch from the center all the way to one side, and then from the center to the other side. Now with right sides facing, we're going to pin our neckband to our bodice. So first, at the center in the back, We have 2 notches, so we want to make sure that we pin there first, that the notch on your neckband matches the notch on your back bodice. And then you should have a dot for the shoulder, and your neckband is going to extend 5/8 of an inch from the front. And we're going to sew using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Clip your curve if you need to, just to make it turn a little. There you go, lay it flat. And go ahead and press your seam up towards your neckband. Okay, now go ahead and grab your collar, and we're going to pin our collar to our neckband, matching those double notches and pinning there first. And you should have a dot on your neckband. That's where your collar is going to end. And then we're going to stitch it down. I'm going to be sewing 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And now go ahead and grab your remaining neckband, and we're going to pin that right over the top, also matching those double notches. Now your collar should be sandwiched between both neckbands. And starting at one end, we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now go ahead and trim and clip into any curves you need to. Trim all the way around. Okay, once you have your neck band finished, all we need to do is stitch it down. So you have 2 options. You can hand stitch this down, which is how I normally like to do it, or following the instructions in the pattern. We're going to pin on the outside. So we're going to make sure that the folded edge is on the seam line, but you're going to be pinning on the outside. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew along this bottom edge, catching our neckband on the inside. And now you've stitched down the inside of your neckband. Now I'm going to start at the neckband again, and I'm going to go around and top stitch across the top. Now go ahead and cut off any loose threads and grab your sleeves. Okay, we're going to attach our sleeve using the flat method. So as you can see, the right side of my bodice is facing me, and the right side of my sleeve is facing my bodice. So right side's facing. I'm going to pin at the shoulder first, that dot right at the center of my sleeve, and I'm going to pin it to my shoulder seam. I'm going to match my dots to my dots, notches to notches. Okay, we're going to attach our sleeve using the flat method. So the right side of my bodice is facing me, the right side of my sleeve is facing my bodice, and I'm going to pin at my shoulder. And then I'm going to make sure I match up my single notch to my single notch, and my double notch to my double notch. Once you have your sleeve pinned, we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. you're going to attach your other sleeve the same way. Okay, I want you to now pin your sleeve together all the way down your side seam, the way I did here, and we're going to sew in one continuous seam. You're going to do that for both sides. So starting at the bottom of our sleeve, sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you're going to do the same thing to the other sleeve and side. We're going to do the hem of our sleeve. So I've turned under 1 1/4 inch. So if you want to turn under 1/4 of an inch and then turn under an inch so that you have a finished edge, I would probably serge my edge, but it's up to you. I'm not doing it for the sake of the tutorial, but you should. And I'm going to sew all the way around. And you're going to do the same thing to the other sleeve hem. Then you're going to make your buttonholes. If you plan to make buttonholes, I'm going to be using snaps, so I'm not making buttonholes on mine, but you have a buttonhole guide. And so what you do is you put your buttonhole guide on top of your band, your front band here, and then you're going to mark where your buttonholes go, and then you can use your instructions that came with your sewing machine on how to make buttonholes. So that's how you would make them now. So I'm going to set that aside. We are done with our bodice for the moment, so do the other sleeve hem and then set this aside, and we're going to start on our pants. Okay, go ahead and grab your casing, and I've already made my buttonhole, so you should have buttonhole markings. Go ahead and make your buttonhole according to your sewing machine's instructions. And I did it on both ends of my casing. And now we're going to attach this to our bodice. So grab your bodice, and we're going to place this right sides facing, and we're going to align notches. And we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and press this down, and then we're going to start constructing our pants. Okay, grab pattern piece 12, which is the left pant front, and grab one of your pocket facings. Right sides are facing each other, and you should have a notch that matches up. And we're going to pin there, and we're going to sew 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then go ahead and trim it down. And we're going to do some understitching just on the pocket, so my seam allowance is towards my pocket facing, and sewing only on the pocket facing. And then turn that to the inside and go ahead and give this a press. And you're going to attach your pocket facing to your right pant front. Okay, I have pressed my pocket facing to the inside, right? So press it to the inside. You can see the understitching. And then I want you to grab your pocket, and you're going to lay it over the top, and you're going to match the notches on your pocket facing to your pocket and pin. I'm going to pin here just to keep it all together, and then match the notch on the side. Now we're going to sew only our pocket to our pocket facing. Now when you turn it to the front, you've got your pocket. And now we're just going to stitch this down the side so it becomes all one piece. Your pin and baste across the top. And now we have one whole front pocket done. And you're going to do the other pocket the same way. Okay, we're gonna start constructing our fly front. So I want you to lay your right pant over your left pant, and we're going to stitch the crotch from the large dot that you should have marked to the notch. So we're gonna reinforce at the dot, so make sure you back stitch. And then grab your fly front. Okay, so we're going to grab our fly and we're going to place our fly right sides facing on the right pant leg. And you should have 2 notches to let you know you're on the right track. So we're going to pin there first. And then we're going to put a pin through our dot. If you haven't marked it on the other side, just look over on the inside. You can see where your dot is. And we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And now we're going to understitch on our fly. So we're sewing only on our fly, and the seam allowance is facing our fly. And now go ahead and grab your zipper. Okay, so I have my zipper and I have placed it with my teeth facing my fly and my tape extending over that seam line about 1/4 inch, and my tab is about 7/8 of an inch from the top of my pants. And I'm going to stitch on this side of my zipper tape. I have a 9-inch zipper, so mine is extending. Yours will extend beyond that as well, so that's okay. If your zipper is extending, we can trim that off later. And now we're going to continue with our fly. Okay, now go ahead and we're going to go to the ironing table. I want you to turn your fly to the inside, and I want you to give it a press. And then I want you to press the other edge of your other pant leg 3/8 of an inch. So you're going to fold to the inside and measure out 3/8 of an inch, and we're going to press that down. Okay, I'm going to have you open your zipper, and you're going to place your other side along the edge of your zipper like this, and we're going to sew close to the edge. I'm going to pin mine first because I want to make sure it's aligned, and I'm just going to test it really quickly. Zipper it up. Make sure the front is overlapping the way it's supposed to, and open it back up. And I'm going to sew close to the edge. Let me pull this. There we go. And then go back to my zipper foot. And now you can go ahead and close your zipper. And now we're going to finish with the underlap. Okay, so I've taken my underlap and I have folded it in half and serged around it, and I have now pinned it to my pants. So I aligned it, making sure my double notches matched, and I am going to stitch over the existing stitching that we have already. Now all that's left to do is to sew the stitching on the top. Okay, so I pinned my underlap to one side so that it's out of the way. And then I'm going to turn my pants to the right side so the right side is facing me. And with a chalk roller or a chalk marker, you should have made your line, your stitching line. And we're just going to follow that, making sure we're not catching anything other than this side of our pant leg. Go ahead and give this a press. Last thing to do is to tack these down together. So I'm only tacking the fly and the underlap. And I'm just going to sew a couple of stitches. Okay, now we're done with our fly, and we're going to grab our back pant legs. We're gonna lay right sides facing, our back leg on top of our front. I'm gonna go back to my regular foot, and we're going to stitch together our inseam. So the first thing you wanna do is, of course, align your notches, pin along the length of your inseam. Starting at the bottom of our pant leg, we're going to sew 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to do the same thing with the other pant leg. Okay, we're going to pin the entire side seam of our pant legs like I've done here. And then starting at the bottom, we're going to sew all the way up using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now that we have both side seams of our pants sewn together, we're going to sew up the crotch, the remaining part of the crotch, and then we're going to attach our pants to our bodice. So go ahead and pin right sides facing those 3 notches. Pin in that crotch seam. And we're going to stop sewing where we had stopped sewing earlier at that notch. And we're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, grab your bodice and you have your pants. Now we're going to attach the bottom of our casing to the top of our pants. So you're going to align the same notches that you had for your bodice. And we're going to stitch everything down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I want you to press up 5/8 of an inch on your casing. We're working on the very top, so as you can see, the pants and the bodice are folded onto each other, and I'm working on the very top part of my casing. And what you want to do is you're going to place the right side of your casing so that you're looking at the folded edge, and you're going to pin it to the top, and you're going to sew through all layers. Pin a couple of times. And you're just going to follow your existing stitching. I want you to pivot and close this up. And do the same thing on the other side. And turn it to the inside, right, like this, so it's finished on the front. And then we're going to do the same thing that we did with our neckband. We're going to place the folded edge along our seam line, but we're going to pin on the outside, and then we're going to stitch close to the edge. Do that all the way around. Okay, now that we have our casing finished on the inside, we are practically done. Now we're going to create our drawstring. So set this aside and grab the 2 pieces for your drawstring. We're going to sew one end to one end together so it becomes one long piece. And now what we're going to do is we're going to press this open, and then we're going to press to the center, and then we're going to overlap it and then stitch along the edge. Okay, I have pressed it to the center, and now I'm going to fold over and sew close to the edge. Now we're going to draw this through our casing. Grab a safety pin Grab your jumper and you're gonna go in through one buttonhole and you're gonna push your safety pin all the way through until you reach the other buttonhole and come out the other end. Okay, I've sifted through. I'm going to make little knots at the end of my ties. And then I clip off the very tip. And now all that's left for you to do is, if you want to put a hand stitch, a snap, here you can. And then of course the hem of your pants. Now I roll mine up, but if you want to finish the hem of your pants, we're just gonna turn under 1.25 inches. So turn under 1/4 inch, then 1 inch, and then sew all the way around, and you are all done. You made it! I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. Until next time, peace.